So let's get one thing clear from the start. This is a very big model. And here it is compared to a normal 1:50 scale truck. Not only is it big, it's also heavy because it's mainly made of die-cast metal. And if we put it on the cranes etc. weighbridge, it's a good 4 kilograms worth. A big model like this comes in a big box, and this one gets its own shipping carton. And there's also a clue on the shipping carton because it says there are batteries inside. There are spacers inside the carton, and then we can pull out the main box itself. And it's a nicely decorated NZG box, and there's the scale 1:18. That means this model is roughly 3 times larger than a 1:50 scale model. Inside the big box there's an instruction brochure, and there's a bag containing some parts that we'll look at later. The trays are factory sealed, so there's a bit of knife work to do, and then we can lift off the top tray. And before we get too excited, we need to follow the instruction manual and lift out the model like this in order to avoid any damage. As you can see, there's soft paper protecting the paintwork, and this model certainly gives your arms a workout because of its heavy weight. There is an instruction brochure, so let's take a look at that. It tells us the model is a Mercedes-Benz Actros GigaSpace 4x2, and there are instructions for getting it out of the box, for installing the battery, controlling the lights, and some of the other features. There's also a bag of some bits and pieces, so let's take a look inside that. And in the true sense, it is a mixed bag. There's some nice cotton gloves, a screwdriver, and a pair of wheel chocks. And there's also a standard button type battery. The review model did come with one problem: it was missing an inside door trim. But this was quickly supplied, and it was an easy fit to press in. And the good news is that no glue was needed. Well, just look at those snazzy gloves. In terms of assembly, the only thing we actually need to do is to fit the battery. And to do that, we need to tilt the cab. It's a big boy, so it takes a little bit of effort. And then we can use the supplied screwdriver to take the cover off of the battery compartment. That's all well and good, but then the gloves are actually no good for doing any detail work. So we'll have to get our fingers out for that to fit the battery in the holder. It's all straightforward enough and it fits into place. And then we replace the battery compartment cover, screw it back, and the job's done. The big scale does allow more detail, so we see that at the start on the chassis, where there are plenty of hoses and cables modelled. And one of the impressive things about this Actros is that so much of it is actually modelled in metal. So it has a very solid and high quality feel. Perhaps the only disappointing detail is the tyres, which are the same on both axles, and at this size they really need some branding in the sidewalls. The Actros cab looks great and has a proper window in the roof. And the overall finish of the cab is high quality and beautiful. The front grille is excellent, and there's a generic NZG number plate. Inside the cab the detail is of a high standard with nice moulded parts. Behind the cab there's finer detailing of the coiled lines, stepping plates and tanks. And at the back the wheel arches are plastic, which mirrors the real truck. Yes, it's features time, so let's begin underneath, and the wheels spin easily. And also we see that there's reasonable steering on the front axle, and the mechanism is nice and smooth. But wait, there's more, because there's also fully sprung suspension on the rear axle. And if we come back to the front axle, it also has some partially sprung suspension. Let's move on to the Cranes etc. mega test track. And the big heavy Actros moves along purposefully in a straight line. And if we set the wheels, we can also steer the Actros. One neat little extra touch with the model is that you get a pair of wheel chocks. And you can use those to stop the model in case it decides to go runaway. With the wheels chocked, let's lift the front axle and we can see another interesting feature. And that is that the steering wheel is linked to the steering, which is an achievement given that the cab tilts. Going behind the cab, we see that the fifth wheel has a working latch mechanism, and it's nice and realistic. Also nice behind the cab are the coiled lines because they have attachment points where you can hang them up when they're not being used. And it's good that that stops them waving about unrealistically. There are still plenty more features to go, so let's get on and open up the front of the cab. And that lifts up nicely, and you can see there's plenty of detail underneath. The instructions say you need to open up the front before you tilt the cab, so we've done that. And the cab tilts forward smoothly to a good angle. And when you look underneath, it's a real treat because the engine is very detailed. So good use has been made of the possibilities of 1:18 scale. Moving on, and there's still more because both of the cab doors open. And they're tight fitting, so you need to be able to get a fingernail in to open them. But a nice touch is that they're on a spring, so you get a satisfying clunk. Also inside the cab you can move the armrests of both of the seats. The last feature is something different, and there's a switch for controlling the electronics inside the cab. And there are two settings. You can illuminate the Mercedes-Benz logo, or if you move the switch to the next setting, you can have the logo and a light in the cab. This is certainly an unusual model from NZG because of its large scale. It's also got some interesting features, including the working lights. And in fact, overall, the details and features are really good. But what makes the model really stand out is the beautiful finish. It's not cheap, but it is excellent.